I heard them say I was dead. I heard everything. The whispers of the women, the breathless sobs of my mother, and his cold voice at the door of the shack. Take her to the back. She's no use now. But I wasn't dead. Not even close. My name is Adélia. I was 16 when I decided to die, because dying was the only way I could ever live. That morning, the air was thick like syrup. The kind of heat that presses on your chest and doesn't let you breathe. I was in the garden, digging with my hands beside my mother, when I saw him coming. The overseer. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He pointed. That was enough. He had chosen me, again. And I knew what that meant. It wasn't the first time. But that day, something inside me cracked. Not from fear, from rage. I wasn't going to survive another night like that. Not like the last one. Not like the one before. So when I returned to the shack, I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I laid down on the straw mat and looked up at the ceiling, at the holes in the wood. And I thought, maybe if I stop moving, stop breathing, stop being useful, they'll stop seeing me. That night, I didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't speak, and when everyone was asleep, I placed my hand over my chest, held my breath, and let my body fall still. Not dead, just invisible. At dawn, Donna Sura tried to wake me. She called my name. Once, twice, touched my face. I didn't move. Then I heard it. The first woman gasp. My mother's cry. The word passed like smoke. She's gone. And then, they covered my face. But my eyes were open, just enough to see the world I was about to leave. Not because I wanted to die, but because this was the only way out. And so began the day I died. To live? They carried me like a body, my arms limp, eyes closed, breath so shallow it barely touched my lips. I heard the footsteps. I felt the sway of their hands under my back. I heard the whisper. She's gone. But I wasn't. Inside, I was more awake than ever. I was 16 years old, and I had made the most terrifying decision of my life. To play dead in a place where the dead disappeared. They laid me down behind the quarters, near the row of thorny bushes that marked the edge of the forest. That's where they took the ones who didn't make it. The ones who fell from exhaustion. The ones who bled after punishment. The ones whose screams were never meant to be remembered. I was placed beside them, or so they thought. The women wrapped me in a torn cloth. I heard my mother's breath tremble. I couldn't see her, but I knew her hands. One of them brushed my forehead. She kissed it, softly. Then whispered so close to my ear I almost lost it. Forgive me. Then she walked away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry and hold her. But I didn't move, because if I did even once, it would all be over. Time became strange after that. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes, hours, maybe more. The sun climbed slowly. I felt the heat on my feet, then on my chest. I was afraid I would sneeze, or cough, or shake, but I kept still. When I finally heard no footsteps, no voices, no cries, I opened my eyes. Above me, the sky looked different, free, unreachable, but mine, at least for that moment. I sat up slowly. My body ached from the stillness. My hands were trembling. Then I saw it, just beyond the bush line. A narrow path, barely visible. But there. I was alive, and for the first time, I wasn't in the shack. I was outside of it. And no one knew. I stood. My legs almost gave in. I held the cloth around me and took one step, then another. And with every foot that touched the dirt, I told myself, don't look back. But my heart, it had never left. They laid me on a sheet of sackcloth. I heard it crackle beneath me. I felt every breath I wasn't allowed to take. I had trained my body for this, for stillness, for silence, for pretending to belong among the ones who no longer breathed. But the truth was, my heart was screaming inside me. Voices murmured around me. Soft sobs. My mother's voice broke as she whispered prayers I had never heard from her before. And then, heavy boots. I recognized the footsteps before they even stopped near my feet. The fighter, he didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just said, carry her to the back. Dump her behind the old shed. As if I was nothing. As if I hadn't screamed for help just 2 nights before. As if I hadn't been someone's daughter. 4 men lifted me, rough hands, dry breath. I kept my body limp, my eyelids lowered just enough to hide the tremble. We passed the quarters, the smokehouse, the well, and then we reached the slope behind the shed, the place where no one walked unless they were burying something or someone. They dropped me, hard. The ground hit my back with a jolt, and I nearly gasped, but I bit my tongue. I heard one of them say, should we dig? And another answer, no need. Let the buzzards do the rest. They walked away. Their footsteps grew softer, then vanished. And I was alone, still, cold, waiting. For the sun to move. For the wind to change. For proof that I hadn't just died for real. Time passed like mud, and when I finally opened my eyes, the sky above me was gray. The air smelled like dust and old fire. I was free, but only if I could crawl, run, disappear, and if I could do it before anyone saw me alive. The heat that day was unbearable. Sweat pooled in my lower back as I lay still under the thin white sheet they had draped over me. I could hear everything, footsteps around me, whispers in the shadows, and my mother's shaky breathing. Trying not to sob out loud. No one dared speak my name. That's how they treated death. Not with noise, but with distance. 2 older women lifted my body gently, carefully, like I was something holy, but they didn't know. I wasn't gone. Not yet. As they carried me out of the quarters, the sunlight hit my face. I fought the urge to blink. My chest felt like it was on fire from holding back breath after breath. I counted, 1, 2, 3. They placed me down on a soft patch of dirt behind the smokehouse. A place they used for burials when the white folks didn't want to waste a plot on us. I heard one of the women whisper, we'll come back at night. That's when I knew. Someone, maybe more than one, had guessed the truth, and they were helping. Hours passed. Flies buzzed near my ears. My arms stiffened. I could hear the chickens, the clang of the water buckets, the sound of firewood being chopped. The world kept moving, as if I really was gone. That night, when the moon rose, I heard her voice. It was Ruth, the oldest woman in the quarters. She knelt beside me, her hands warm as she placed them on my cheek. Get up, child. You can't stay dead forever. I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was her smile. Tired, sad, but proud. She helped me sit up slowly, hiding me beneath her shawl. I wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but she pressed her finger to my lips. Not yet. You're a ghost now, and ghosts don't talk where the living can hear. That night, we walked in silence through the backfield. Ruth, me, and another woman I couldn't see clearly. They led me to a shed at the far edge of the property. One no one used anymore. Inside, there was a blanket, a jug of water, and half a piece of sweet bread. You'll stay here until we figure out what comes next, Ruth whispered. But remember, if they find you alive, they'll finish what they started. And just like that, my new life began. Not as a deal, but as a memory the world thought was buried. They wrapped me in a sheet. Rough, still damp. I kept my body still, even when they lifted me. The voices around me sounded far away. One whispered a prayer. Another sobbed softly. But I focused on my breath, slow, small, like the rhythm of sleep without dreaming. I felt every step as they carried me out of the quarters. The breeze on my face. The way the air shifted when the trees opened. And then, the cool shade of the woods. They were taking me to the far side of the fields, where they buried those who didn't make it. No name. No stone, only earth and silence. I had counted the steps before. In the rare moments when we were allowed to collect wood, I had memorized the path. That's where I planned to disappear. When they laid me on the ground, I heard one of them say, "We shouldn't do this. What if someone sees?" "She's gone," another replied. "And it's better she rests where they won't find her again." I almost cried. They didn't know I was alive. But they were trying to protect me. They covered me lightly, not with soil, but with leaves and brush. Enough to hide, not to bury. Then they left. The forest swallowed their footsteps. And I was alone. For hours, I didn't move. The sun shifted. Insects crawled nearby. My limbs ached from stillness. But I waited. Until I was sure the night had fallen. Only then did I sit up. Come. The first breath I took felt like being born again. But I didn't run. I waited until the moon was high, and I moved only through the shadows. I had no shoes, no food, no plan beyond the first tree line. But I had something stronger, a reason. I wasn't escaping just for me. I was escaping for the girls who couldn't, for the ones who never got to fake their deaths, because theirs were real. Behind me, the world still believed I was gone. Ahead of me, I wasn't sure what waited. But I had already done the unthinkable. I had died in silence. To finally live in truth, they laid me in the ground before sunrise. Wrapped in a thin sheet, no prayers, no tears, just 2 men with shovels and orders not to ask questions. I felt the cold earth press against my back as they lowered me into the shallow pit behind the tool shed, the place where they buried those who didn't make it, or those who were supposed to disappear. The sheet was thin. I could feel the dirt as it fell, slow, hesitant. One of them whispered, "Poor thing, so young." The other just grunted. I held my breath as long as I could. Waited for them to leave. Counted the footsteps. Waited longer. When the silence returned, I pushed the sheet aside and opened my eyes to darkness. I hadn't thought this far ahead. All I knew was I couldn't stay in that hole forever. I crawled, dug my way sideways, scraping elbows and knees on roots and stones. My breath came in gasps, shallow and fast, like the earth itself didn't want to let me go. Finally, I reached the surface. The world was different, darker, colder. I wasn't a girl anymore. I was a ghost now, and ghosts had no place in the quarters. I moved through the edge of the fields like a shadow, stayed close to the trees, listened for voices, watched for lanterns. I didn't know where to go. I just knew where I couldn't return. And then I saw her. Behind the wash house, crouched low, was an old woman named Jonah. The one everyone called mute because she hadn't spoken in years. She looked straight at me, not startled, not afraid, just knowing. She held a finger to her lips, then beckoned me forward. That night, I slept in a space no wider than a barrel, beneath the planks of the old bathhouse, wrapped in rags, breathing slow. Jonah brought me food without saying a word, a crust of cornbread, half a dried peach, a cup of rainwater. And she never asked why I was hiding. She already knew, because she had once done the same. They left me there for hours, wrapped in a cloth, motionless, silent. Every now and then, I heard footsteps pass nearby, but no one looked closely. No one dared. To them, I was already gone. And in a way, I couldn't move. Couldn't risk breathing too loud. Even the sound of my heartbeat felt dangerous. But the moment finally came, late afternoon, when the sun began to bend behind the trees and the shadows stretched long like arms. 2 older women came. One was Ruth, the cook's sister. The other, Nini, who had buried more people in that place than anyone should. They said nothing, just lifted me. My body hung limp between them. Their arms were strong, but their touch was soft. Like they knew, like they were helping, not mourning. They carried me behind the quarters, to the far end of the fence, near the old fig tree. the same place where others had been taken before. But there was no hole dug for me, just a pile of dry leaves, a shallow ditch, and a few planks of broken wood nearby. Ruth laid me down gently and whispered, "Stay still. Don't open your eyes. Not even if it hurts." Then they left, and the world went quiet again. The wind stirred the leaves beside my face. Bugs tickled my arms. The dirt itched beneath my back. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. This was the test, the true moment of death, the kind you walk through while still breathing. And then, footsteps, heavy, different, a man's boots. They stopped a few feet away. He grunted, spat. "Bury her deep," he said. "So the stink don't come up." I waited, but no shovel moved, no earth shifted, nothing. Then I heard something else, the sound of someone walking away, and another staying behind. I prayed it wasn't him, the one who always watched me too long. Then the footsteps faded, and I was alone again, for a while. The ground was cold, damp. The rough wood above me pressed into my chest as I lay motionless, hidden beneath the false floor they used for tools and old cloth. I wasn't sure if it was night or just the darkness of being buried. But I could still hear them, boots, voices, the dragging sound of something or someone being pulled. I held my breath every time footsteps passed too close. I thought about coughing. I thought about screaming. But I didn't. Because this was the price of freedom, silence that choked, stillness that hurt. My whole body screamed to move, to run, to breathe fully. But I stayed hidden. Above me, they were searching. I heard the snap of firewood, the shift of straw, and once a voice, "She's gone, gone." The word echoed inside me like a prayer. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I was under their feet. And if they found me, it would be the end, for real this time. I thought of Mama. Of how she touched my hair before the women wrapped me in the sheet. Of the tears she let fall but quickly wiped away so no one would notice. She knew. She always knew. Hours passed, maybe a day. I only moved when the sounds were gone and the sun's warmth had faded. That night, I pushed up the wood, just enough to breathe real air again. I slipped out like a ghost. No footsteps. No words. Just me and the night. I ran barefoot into the trees, each root and stone cutting into my feet, reminding me I was alive. Alive. And alone. But free, at least for now. I stayed still for hours after they covered me. I could feel the weight of the dirt above, but not enough to bury. Just enough to hide. A shallow grave behind the old smokehouse, where they buried the ones no one asked about. But I had asked for this. Earlier that morning, I'd whispered to Ruthie, "When they think I'm dead, put me near the mango tree." The shallow part, she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But her eyes, they didn't say no. And now, here I was. Alive, buried, waiting for the night. When I finally heard her footsteps, they were soft as breath. She knelt beside me and gently brushed away the layer of dirt covering my face. Her hands were shaking. "Adélia," she whispered. "You sure about this?" I didn't answer with words. Just a nod. Just enough. She passed me a bundle, a torn dress, a cloth with dried cassava, and a small gourd of water. Inside the lining, a folded note. "If they catch you, eat this paper." I didn't ask what was written. I trusted her. Ruthie helped me to my feet. My legs were numb, but my will was sharper than ever. The plan was simple. Follow the river. Cross the old trail. Reach the house of a woman who had once fled and survived. A ghost story turned real.com. Her name was Celine. They said she lived in the hills, took in the broken, the lost. If I reached her, I might not have to hide anymore. But every sound was a threat. Every crack of a branch. Every gust of wind.com. And then I heard it. Dogs, not close, but not far enough. They were searching. I dropped to the ground, heart pounding in my ears. Tears filled my eyes, not from fear, but from fury.com. I was so close to becoming something other than a shadow. Then, a rustle. Ruthie again. She had followed me part of the way. They're looking near the banana fields. You have to move now, she whispered. I hugged her, tighter than I ever had anyone. You saved me, I whispered. She pulled back, her eyes fierce. No, you saved yourself. I just covered your tracks. And then she disappeared into the trees, and I ran. Between fear and freedom. Between the grave they made for me, and the life I was about to claim. I don't remember how long I stayed under the floorboards. Long enough for the voices to fade. Long enough for the footsteps to stop. Long enough for the fear to turn into fire. They thought I was dead. They laid me on the cart, rolled me out behind the shack where they left the others. The ones who didn't make it, but I did. I had one chance. And when the sun went down and the cries faded into silence, I crawled out, away. My breath was thin. My legs shook, but my heart beat like it never had before. Every branch I stepped on, I thought it was a scream. Every gust of wind, I thought it was a voice calling me back. But no one came. I ran until my feet bled, until the trees swallowed the sound of my name. And then, I found her. An old woman with eyes like mine, living deep in the woods, near a stream. She didn't ask where I came from. She just said, "You're not the first, but you'll need to be strong to stay." She gave me food, water, a name that wasn't mine so I could live again. I stayed with her for years. Grew, healed, learned to speak again without whispering. One day, she died in her sleep, and I was alone again. But this time, free. I moved with the seasons, took odd jobs in distant towns, kept my eyes low, my words careful. But I never forgot the day I stopped breathing, by choice. The day I stopped being what they expected and became who I needed to be. Now I sit here, an old woman with trembling hands, and I whispered this story not for pity, but for memory.com. Because somewhere another girl might be waiting, holding her breath, listening to the silence, and maybe she'll hear this, and maybe she'll know. You don't have to die to be free, but sometimes, pretending to die is the only way to live.